Again, I just want to thank everyone for joining us for the first session of our Brown Bag Seminar Series. I am so excited to see what these 4 sessions hold. Today we have Dr. April Scott. She will be talking about just strategies to help us to cope with these difficult times that we are going through. So I will give you a quick bio about Dr. Scott, and then I will turn it over to her. So Dr. April Scott has a BS in psychology from Tuskegee University, a MS in clinical psychology from Barry University, and a PhD in counseling psychology from Auburn University. She currently serves as the Associate Director of Mental Health Initiatives at the University of South Carolina, where she is responsible for decreasing public and personal stigma surrounding mental health conditions, coordinating mental health outreach, trainings, and education to faculty, staff, and students, and working with campus administration to improve efforts to improve student well-being. Dr. Scott is passionate about mental health and making treatment accessible, especially for communities of color. She uses her expertise as a psychologist, educator, and creative to influence her work in a way that makes her program informative, interactive, and excited. Dr. Scott is committed to normalizing mental health and helping clients to find their inner strength and increase their resilience on their journey to wellness and well-being. So without further ado, I want to welcome Dr. Scott, and I thank you so much for being here, and we look forward to everything that you share with us today. Again, students, thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Calder. I'm super excited about this conversation. Please feel free to utilize the chat function to participate. You do not have to wait until the end of the presentation to ask any questions or interject. I will be honest, this is my first time using WebEx for presentations, so you are going to witness me learn as I go. So me with any technical difficulties, hopefully there won't be any. So I think I'll just hit share. All right. So I titled this presentation as workshop, Check Up from the Neck Up. And I borrowed this phrase from a colleague, and I love it because we often get our regular medical checkups for everything from the neck down, or sometimes from the neck up, we just don't do inside the head. But it just kind of, to me, conceptualized that idea that how often do we check in with our mental health? Like we have a physical every day, every year, you may have an annual, you may go, every 6 months, but how often are we going in for those mental health checks? So that's what I want to do today, is to give us some time today to check in with our own mental health. So if you could drop in the chat really quickly, which number best captures your mood right now? 1, 2, or 3? Kind of what's your state of being? Okay, a lot of 1s. Wow. Okay, 2. I relatable to the number 2. Awesome. Okay. So this just a way to check in. Anyone want to share why they chose their number? And again, you can put in the chat or come on the microphone.
I'll share. I put 1. There's just so much for me personally going on right now. I am taking Dr. Calder's class. I'm also trying to do practicum. And then I work full time. I'm a mom. I have a husband. So it's just a lot right now. So I'm just trying to make it through.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. That is a lot on your plate. A couple people said that they have 2 classes with Dr. Calder, so that's some of there too. Okay. Some good environment. That's good to hear. Someone has an 8-month-old. Bless your heart. Oh, bless all the parents out there and pet parents as well who have to share your space right now. My heart goes out to you. So let's kind of continue with this conversation of doing a check-in. So we're going to do a really short 2-minute journal. So hopefully you have something to write with or write on. You could do it in a notes app. But I just want to take 2 minutes to kind of ground us. Oftentimes when we do these brown bag series, we're coming from one thing and then about to hop off to go to a next, and we're kind of in a frenzy. So I just want to be intentional about us grounding, just to come to the moment. So a couple of questions. You can answer all if you have the time, or just answer what you can. I'm going to start the 2 minutes now just for sake of time. But questions are, for the prompt, something you are grateful for today. And if it's hard to think of today, think of this past week. The best thing that happened to you today, something you did well today, how you could have made today better, and how you'll make the rest of today better. So I want to do a quick check-in. How are you feeling right now? If you could describe how you're feeling after writing that in 1 or 2 words, you can throw it in the chat or come on the microphone. How would you describe your current feeling after doing the 2-minute journal?
Relieved.
Relieved. Okay, good. Good, thanks. Anyone else? And I'll keep an eye on the chat.
Happier.
Grateful. Good. Happier. Relieved and grateful. Happier. I'm seeing that in the corner. Good. And think about it. This was only 2 minutes. I didn't do some big intervention, some psychological test. Literally was just 2 minutes of you reflecting on your day. And the reason I wanted to start out with that, one, to ground us, but also just to show how it's the little things that we can do on a regular basis that can help with our mental health. Because as some of you have already stated, many of you are going from one thing to the next. You're balancing a lot of things at one time and you're going. And when we're going, we often don't stop to unplug and to sit and reflect. And when we do that, we sometimes lose out on the good things that are happening. Now, this is not to ignore that sometimes things are a little bad, right? I'm not preaching toxic positivity, but I do think there is power in gratitude and acknowledging the best thing that happened and how you can shift the trajectory of your day. And research has shown that even keeping gratitude journals over a period of 2 weeks has improved people's mood and outlook on life. So wanted to just share this with you. You can take these prompts with you and do it on a daily basis, or even if you struggle at night falling asleep, which many people do, this is a great exercise to kind of slow your brain down and to reflect on things that are going well instead of rehashing every single thing that went wrong in the day. And thank you all for doing that. All right, so let's give a little bit of context here. So Minds conducted a survey back in April of 2,086 college students to assess the impact of COVID-19 on mental health. Now, keep in mind, this was only maybe a month into the pandemic, April 2020. But even then, they found that 1 in 5 college students said that their mental health had significantly worsened since COVID-19. And that 80% of respondents reported that COVID-19 had negatively impacted their mental health. Continuing with that same survey, what they found that most common ways that COVID-19 had impacted lives in the areas of stress and anxiety. So you see that's a pretty high percentile. The same thing with disappointment or sadness. Then you had that loneliness or isolation piece that many people felt with having to be home, or even those who had to quarantine very early, or just trying to make that adjustment to being at home, as well as 48% indicated a financial setback. And we know that if you remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you're not maintaining those basic needs, it's going to be hard to take care of mental health if things like shelter, food, water, safety are not taken care of. Then those who had to relocate. So I'm not sure, of course you all remember back in when campuses began closing, a lot of students had to figure out what to do. How were they going to get home? And even parents having to figure out what to do with their kids, how to get their kids back home. So that caused a lot of stress. And I'm sharing that because of context, because I think sometimes we forget that we are still in a pandemic because it's pretty outside, right? Well, depending on where you are right now, I'm in South Carolina, it's rainy, but it's not like a natural disaster where you're getting visual reminders that we're in crisis mode. So you can easily forget and then begin to judge yourself for not performing at the same capacity that you performed prior to a pandemic. So one thing to keep in mind is that in a pandemic, your body's main goal is survival. We go back into that primitive mode. That's everything. All the resources are going to be geared to helping you survive. Anything outside of that is extra. So that's why right now the simplest things seem very hard to do. I'm not sure if you all can relate, but I know for me, I found reading to be so hard to sit down to read. And I'm like, is something wrong with my brain? Why can't I not just sit down and read for 20 minutes? Then I had to remember, like, oh, it's a pandemic. So there's a part of your brain that's still like, there's a crisis outside. Not only are we dealing with the health pandemic, we have the pandemic of social unrest and racial injustice right now. So our resources are being depleted on a regular basis. So I say this all to give yourself a break if you find yourself less productive this year than you were in 2019. I also teach, and I told my students on the first day of class, like, hey, y'all, I've never taught in a pandemic. So I want you to manage your expectations of me right now. And I said the same thing to them. And I will also manage my expectations of you because you all have never been a college student during a pandemic. So we are all going to flip, flop, fumble along the way. But what I can guarantee is we're going to get through it together. And I think we have to have that same grace with ourselves when we're thinking about our mental health right now. So even before the pandemic, college students were struggling in some areas of mental health. The top three have consistently been anxiety, depression, and academic concerns. Some of what was already revealed in the comment section, just having so much to do, and then those academic concerns piling on top of that. So even before a pandemic, mental health in college settings or among college students was already kind of a precarious thing. And so now when you pile on two global crises, it's going to be a little shaky. Again, this is all too normalized. If you are struggled, own your struggle. I helped with a campaign we had this past semester about getting on the struggle bus. Like, we are all on the struggle bus, right? Struggle bus, from administration all the way to students and faculty and staff. So again, the message here is you are not alone, because oftentimes when we struggle, particularly for my high achievers who are in the room, it's very easy to begin to feel like you're struggling because you're doing something wrong. That the reason why this isn't easy for you is because something is wrong with you, versus like, no, it's not easy for everyone right now. We are all trying to figure it out. So hope you can find some solace in that. So before we can get into how to take care of your mental health, let's talk about some of the signs. And the reason why this is important, because it's not just for you, but also your ability to recognize when some of your friends or your students may be struggling, because people don't often always come out and say like, hey, I'm having a rough day. I'm really struggling with my mental health. It manifests in different ways. So some of those behavioral manifestations are going to be changes in appearance, decrease in productivity, asking for assignment extensions more than normal, or turning in things late, being easily distracted. Also, that muscle tensions and headaches. I always say that my body will know that I'm stressed before my mind picks up on it. And part of that has to do with that just constant moving. So it's important to know, what are your warning signs? What are those things that you can know that gives you a little hint that you may need to take care of your mental health? So some of those emotional signs is excessive worrying or obsessing. So feeling like your brain won't stop, like these thoughts are going on constantly. And it's almost getting to the point where it's interfering with your sleep and your ability to focus. Unusual or irrational fears, which in a pandemic, this is kind of tricky to determine what's unusual or irrational, because we are getting a lot of information from different places. Irritability. Everything annoys you. The person next to you is blinking too loud. Like, it just doesn't matter, because your resources are depleted. And that accelerated heart rate, fear of losing control, and like I mentioned before, those concentration problems. So not to say that if you have one of these signs that something is wrong, but once you start experiencing multiple or noticing multiple, that's a sign that there needs to be an intervention. So think about it like lights on the dashboard of your car. So right now I have one light on. I need to get my oil changed. Like, I just forgot to change my oil. I'm just gonna blame it on the pandemic. But my car reminded me. So every time I get in the car, I get that light. Now, I know if I continue to ignore that light long enough, more lights are going to come on. So it's best that I address it now while I have one light before I get to 4 lights. Any questions about that? All right, so I have a quote here. Your body hears everything your mind says. What does this mean to you? How do you interpret this? Your body hears everything your mind says.
I think it means that your body feels and knows what you're experiencing.
Yep.
So if you are in a stressful situation, your body is going to feel it and it's going to pick it up and
Absolutely.
process it. Just like your mind is processing events, your body processes it as well.
Exactly. Thank you. And I see the comments in the chat, and what you all are touching on is that mind-body connection, right? You can't separate the two. The mental and the physical are connected. And this is also speaking to the power of the thought. What are we saying in our mind? And whatever we tell ourselves, the body responds in kind. So with that being said, my theoretical orientation, for those of you who are studying the area, is I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist. That's my orientation. So I'm really big on emphasizing that mind-body connection. So what I have here is a list of common thinking traps. So these are the things that affect our perception of reality, that affect the things that our mind says and sees, and then later influences how we behave and how we feel. So I want you to take a look over these and see if you recognize yourself. So these are the things that affect how you perceive reality, right? We know reality is based on what we think. So I will share. First of all, most people have more than one. So if you recognize yourself in several, you're in good company. I am a grade A catastrophizer. I have always had an active imagination, and it has followed me into adulthood. I am the person that when I'm in my bed and I hear the ice maker in the freezer, my mind goes, oh God, there's a serial killer that I was just listening to on the true crime podcast. Like, they're in my apartment. If I have a headache for 2 days in a row, I'm like, well, this is it. Let me go ahead and call my insurance company, see what, this is a tumor. I already know, I have a feeling. And the good thing is my coworkers know, so they know how to ignore my dramatics sometimes. But because I know I'm a catastrophizer, I have to constantly check my thoughts. I have to go, April, okay, is there another explanation? Maybe that rattling in your trunk is a loose bolt and not somebody hiding in there. Like, let's not go to the worst case scenario. So I'm curious, and again, share, if you can tell, this is a teaching side of me. I like to get feedback along the way. So thank you for those sharing in the chat. Perfectionism and mind reading. Mind reading is huge. The thing that happens with mind reading is we create stories based off of the thought in our head, and then we act on that story as truth. So let's say you're walking across campus and you wave to a classmate across the yard or across the greenery, and they don't wave back. And you immediately go, oh my God, they don't like me. I knew it. I never make friends. This is why I don't like talking to people. I knew I never should have come here. The next time you see that classmate, you're a little bit rude to them. You don't speak because you're like, they don't like me, so I'm just going to be quiet. Meanwhile, what you didn't know is they had AirPods in and they didn't even see you because they were so deep into what they were listening to. But because that automatic negative thought came in and then you begin to act on it as truth, it has now influenced how you view those interactions. So thank you for sharing this, because the point is, it's not to shame you, it's not to say don't, because clearly I've been in this field for years and I still do it. It's to be aware of what your common thinking traps that you tend to fall in, so you can figure out ways to undo it. So being able to separate the thought between the action is key. So kind of how we did at the beginning, that grounding exercise, all that did was put a little bit of space in between our worlds right now. Same thing when you find yourself jumping into these automatic thoughts or these thinking traps, is how do you put a space in between the thought and the belief, or the thought and the action? Being able to ask yourself some questions. So any questions about that before we continue? All right, cool. So continuing with those thinking trap antidotes, these are some questions you can ask yourself to undo them. One, how do I know this to be true? Is there anything else influencing my reaction, right? Because sometimes we let past issues or past experiences color what we are seeing, which is, again, we're human. How would I advise my best friend to respond, particularly for those who are perfectionistic, because you tend to be harsher on yourself than you would anyone else. So one of the practices for self-compassion is to talk to yourself as you would talk to a friend or a loved one. And also, is there an alternative explanation or perspective? So I don't mind sharing. I got my second dose of the vaccine yesterday. And so because I'm a catastrophizer, please know that I have imagined every side effect imaginable. And if there was a way to watch myself sleep, I wish I could have figured it out, because I was like, if I go to sleep, what happens if I don't wake up? Now, granted, there have been very little cases of that happening. And then I woke up, I was like, oh my God, I'm hot. This is a fever. And I was like, oh, you left the heat on. That's what it is. So sometimes being able, that last point is there an alternative explanation for the perspective is huge. And trying to undo those thinking traps. So continuing with how can we continue to care for our mental health? One, understand that your self-care is going to be key to maintaining your mental health, and knowing that it's a marathon and not a sprint. So just like with any health or life change, the things that we can sustain over time are the ones that are going to be most beneficial. So with self-care, it should be intentional. Meaning you have to set time for self-care. So for whether you are a student or a faculty member, you already know this. Free time rarely remains free. So you may have a couple of open blocks on your calendar. You're like, okay, I'll get to something. I'll take a nap, or I'll get to my self-care then. And before you know it, you found something else to fill that time. Also, just a reminder, with your free time, just because you are free does not mean you are available. And this is a lesson that is important to learn now, so that when you get into the workforce, you get into your field, you are not obligated to fill every moment of your time with something to do. Okay? So perfectionism is the enemy of progress. So again, for my perfectionists, sometimes perfectionism can lead to a paralysis, and procrastination is often connected to perfection. Remember your why. So when you find yourself getting frustrated, why are you here? Why did you sign up for this? Why did you willingly say, I want to do this thing? And it's important to write it down and remember that your support is going to be crucial. So what's your support system? Who do you have in your corner? And your support doesn't always have to come from within your department. So keep that in mind as well. So some key points with, again, how to maintain a good self-concept, mental health, with checking your thoughts, but also work on detaching your achievement and your worth from your achievement. So for high achievers, for those who are willingly pursuing graduate degrees or even secondary degrees, for many of us, we have gotten messages that we are good, we are worthy because of our grades, because of our academic, because of our success in our field. But what happens then when you don't get a good grade, or you don't get a good feedback on an assignment? Then your worth is to decline. So it's important to begin to slowly find things that you can identify that you like about yourself, that makes you a great person, that has nothing to do with academics, being able to separate that, right? And also, why to be here, because with imposter syndrome, that imposter syndrome voice comes in and says, you don't belong here. You're not as smart as everyone else. You never should have done this. Look at everyone else. They're doing better than you. And again, it's not real. It's just a voice. So being able to have a reminder of, why do you deserve to be here? And I say write it down because sometimes it's hard to think of it when you're in the middle of a bad spot. So this is important. Put it on your mirror. Put it on something that you can see every day that reminds you you have earned your spot. I don't know any universities just handing out academic spots like that. So if you got here, it's because you earned your spot. And that imposter syndrome is just a voice. And it's important to know your feelings are not factual. Just because you feel something strongly does not mean it's true. I went to a Beyonce and Jay-Z concert years ago, and I felt like I could quit my job and go follow this concert or this tour. And I knew all the steps. I danced in high school, junior high. I was like, I could do this. I felt it strongly. Then I remembered I got out of breath walking to my seat in the stadium. So even though I felt my feelings were telling me one thing, reality said another. So sometimes you have to use that to combat that imposter syndrome. What is the evidence that's telling you belong here, that you are good enough? So after you've written all that down, now reflect. What would happen if you just accepted the struggle instead of fighting it? And that's one thing we know with anxiety. The more you fight against anxiety, anxiety begins to win. So sometimes accepting what's happening can help you get over the hump. And then visualizing yourself on the other side. So when we're in these tough spots, we develop tunnel vision where we get stuck in the thing we're dealing with. But can you visualize yourself getting out? Can you visualize yourself graduating? Can you visualize yourself turning in that paper that's been the bane of your existence? Claudia, Dr. Calder, remind me of my time. I want to make sure that I'm on track here. 5 minutes. Oh, Lord.
You actually.
Okay. So I'm going to speed. I'll send these slides to you so you can distribute so that everyone have everything. So you'll have these steps on ways that you can, things to do to help with your mental health. 1, stop, breathe, take a breath, talk to yourself as you would a friend. Again, recognizing those warning signs, important. Knowing that wellness is holistic. So what other areas can you devote your attention to outside of academics? And then pouring into yourself daily is key. So what are some daily self-care that you can do? So here I have an example of a self-care guide that I would love for you to kind of fill in the blanks with your own. So I have on the left side, mild, moderate, and severe, because some coping strategies are not going to work for every situation. So for me, I also have prevention. So prevention are the things that you're doing to minimize the stress reaction. So for me, I like to be in bed by 10:30. That's how I prevent stress, is I have a set bedtime. Prevention may look differently to you. And I get it, it's harder. I'm not in grad school anymore. I didn't have a bedtime in grad school. So your prevention may look differently. Your prevention may getting up, you're stretching every morning, or you give yourself 20 minutes to journal. When you are in mild stress, what can you do? So for me, I make sure I get some sleep, I'm going to journal, and I'm going to get a cheesecake. That's what I do. And I may use Insight Timer or read an inspiring book, may contact a friend. So these are good tips to have, again, before you get into that moment, so you know how to resource these things when you need it. Because sometimes the worst thing to do is when you're in the middle of a stressful situation is try to think, because your resources are already a little bit depleted. So lastly, what's your commitment to yourself? What's your personal mantra or thinking trap antidote that you can remind yourself when you hear that imposter syndrome? What can you tell yourself, and how can you show yourself grace this season? My personal mantra is a line from a poem by Nikki Giovanni, Eco Tripping, and the line is, "I am so hip, even my errors are correct." How can I show yourself grace in this season is to honor my mistakes and know that my mistakes do not outnumber the things that I do well. So I want you to answer this on your own. Because of time, we won't have time to reflect on it. But I wanted to leave you with these 2 questions. Here are some resources reminding you, take advantage of the resources available to you. You have already paid for it with your tuition. You don't have to shoulder all of this alone. What will you take away from today? And any questions?
Thank you. Yes, we're going to open it up for questions to Dr. Scott right now. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to ask them now.
I have a question. One, I want to say this was fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. So thank you for this presentation. All of the resources were great. I love the personal mantra that you tell yourself to stop catastrophic thinking. I actually do something like that every morning. What are some strategies or ways that our students, many of our students who I have with me are undergrads, and so they're really starting to feel the pressure from everything that's happening in our society, but they're going to be transitioning to their own careers soon. And that's when the pressure will become a lot more for them. What books that you may recommend to them if they were interested in doing something to develop themselves and find their own mantras? First of all, any of the students that are there, can you guys type in the chat if you already have your own personal mantra?
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead and put it in the chat. Yes, no. Do you have your own personal mantra? Yes, no.
It could be a song lyric.
Okay. So a few people says yes. One person said no.
Be the change.
What could be a way that they can find that personal mantra, find some inspiration? A lot of folks are
Yeah.
saying no.
So I believe in finding what speaks to you. So I'm an artist person. I'm not good at art. I'm a consumer of it. So a lot of my mantras come from songs or poems, particularly a lot of them by Black women, because I believe they speak to me. So I think finding your mantra has to be something that you can relate to. So if you are religious, it may be from a scripture. It may be from a devotional. It may be from something that your grandmother told you. So I'll share. My grandmother, when I would come home from college on the weekends and before I would go back to Tuskegee, my grandmother would say, okay, when you get on that road, make sure you drive and you don't stop. If somebody run in front of your car, you run them over. You don't stop until you get there. And I was like, well, Grandma, was people running in front of your cars when you were little? Like, what's happening? But then as I got older, I took that in a different way. What she was telling me is once you get on the road to whatever the destination, you keep going. And if anything gets in your way, you run it over. So that was a mantra from my grandmother, right? It wasn't super articulate. It wasn't in the book. So one way is to find things that speak to you and then look to people that you admire. And what are they using as inspiration?
Thank you. That's excellent. I actually just added in the chat to GK Warren. GK, are you with us?
I think GK said the Philippians 4 was one for her.
Right. I wanted her to just share it for us. You can take yourself off of mute and just tell us, what does it say?
Okay, I'll read it to you guys. So it says, may you always be joyful in your union with the Lord. I say it again, rejoice. Show a gentle attitude toward everyone. The Lord is coming soon. Don't worry about anything, but in all your prayers, ask God for what you need, always asking him with a thankful heart. And God's peace, which is far beyond human understanding, will keep your hearts and minds safe in union with Christ Jesus. In conclusion, my friends, fill your minds with those things that are good and that deserve praise, things that are true, noble, right, pure, lovely, and honorable. Put into practice what you learn and receive from me, both my words and from my actions. And the God who gives us peace will be with you. So it's basically saying what kind of thoughts should go through your mind versus those negative thoughts, and to fix your mind on God. If you don't know the answer, then lean on him.
That's good. That's good. And there are a lot of people who lean onto their faith and to scripture to push them through and to remind them. A podcaster I follow, she has a line, it's not from scripture, but basically she says, God will not play you. And so I kind of borrowed her mantra as well, because it was this reminder of like, okay, you're not going to be put in these positions or given these opportunities to be embarrassed or made fun of. So whatever is happening to you, and it kind of ties back into that I am so hip, even my errors are correct, that even if I mess up, there's a reason I was supposed to make that mistake, because I needed to learn from it, or that mistake is going to make me better. So that's one thing that I embrace, is embracing the failures along the way, because once we start fearing failure and making it a monster, then we stop stretching ourselves. We stop moving ourselves out of our comfort zone because we're so afraid of making a mistake, when in actuality, we make mistakes all the time. And honestly, that is literally the only way that you learn and get better. Is you got to keep falling to get back up, learn from what you fail, learn from how you fail, and then do it better the next time. And that failure is not going to define you. So going back to those stories that we tell ourselves, sometimes we get caught up that, oh, that bad grade or that bad decision, that's going to be my story for life. You're like, no, that's a snapshot of your life. So being able to keep things in perspective, I found to be helpful as well.
Dr. Scott, you've done an awesome job.
Thank you.
Another one, and it is, what other people think of you is not your business.
Yep. That's a great one.
Their business. What they think of you is their business, because sometimes we get so caught up into thinking about our self-worth based on somebody else's thoughts or what somebody else said.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. That's something I have to remind myself often because we all, we all want to be liked. We all want to be viewed in positive ways. But you're right. Once we start caring too much, then we're giving them basically the strings to direct our movement, right? So who's holding your puppet strings? If it's the opinions of other people, then you're going to be all over the place. But if it's about what do you think, what do the people that matter to you, that's going to shift how you move. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm. Great job.
That's good. These are some good ones in the chat.
Thank you. It's one of my favorites. It's actually part of what I say as a personal mantra in the morning. So this was just absolutely fantastic. Is there anyone else who wanted to share some thoughts or comments? You can write them in the chat, but you can close us out with anything that you have found in addition to what we've discussed that might be helpful to someone else.
I have something. I suffer from anxiety like really bad, and what has really helped is this quote. And I took that as at the end of the day, it's gonna end. You're gonna lay down and then take the mistakes that you made or that you think you made during the day and think about them and pray about it. And then when you wake up in the morning, just make sure you don't make those same mistakes.
I like that. At the end of the day is going to end. I love that. And you know what that is? It's also perspective. Because one thing about anxiety is a lot about us. We get too future minded. How like depression is because sometimes we get stuck in the past, where anxiety is we get stuck in the future. So what that's saying is, at the end of the day, this day is going to end. This day is going to be over. Even if it's the worst day of my life, it's only one day, and I'll start all over again the next morning. I like that. That's a very good perspective shift.
Well, with that, Dr. Scott, we will end here. We want to give you a round of applause. So can everyone please give a round of applause, put it in the chat box. We are so very thankful that you were with us this afternoon and blessed us with a really great presentation on personal and mental health. You are going to receive within the next few days a certificate of our appreciation on behalf of the School of Education for coming to us and speaking with us this afternoon. And I also want to thank Dr. Calder for being able to reach out to you and find this awesome connection so that we can have this great presentation this afternoon. It was a very, very nice meeting you.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for the invite. You all enjoy the rest of your afternoon. I put my contact information, email and Instagram if you want to follow. But thank you all. This has been thank you for engaging and also working with me as I figured out WebEx. I appreciate the grace.
Dr. Calder, do you have any final words?
No, I just want to say thank you to Dr. Scott. Thank you, Dr. DeQueer, for putting this awesome series together. Thank you, students, for joining us. And we really hope that you use some of the tools that were shared today on your day-to-day and let us know if you have any questions. That is all.
Thank you. And join us next month. At the end of the month, we will meet same time, the last Wednesday in February, and we will have a student panel who will be discussing field and clinical experiences during this new virtual era that we are all in, how to navigate it and how to overcome some challenges or troubleshoot some problems. So we look forward to seeing these 3 students. We welcome them next month, and we look forward to seeing you all again next month. Thank you, Dr. Calder. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.